Let's jump right into this explainer and look at a seriously fascinating piece of ancient text, Psalm 67. Now, on the surface, it looks like just a very short song. In fact, if you look at the original Hebrew, the entire thing is only about 60 words long. Literally 60 words. But as we're going to see today, the structural engineering behind this tiny text is just absolutely brilliant. It takes us on this incredible journey, expanding from a super localized personal request into a massive, breathtaking global vision. It's essentially a masterclass in how a few carefully chosen words can create a ripple effect that covers the whole world. So let's get into it. We're starting right at the beginning with verse 1. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face to shine upon us. Now I want you to notice the specific pronoun the author chose here, us. This is a deeply personal, incredibly intimate plea. It's directed toward a small, specific group of people. You have to remember, ancient communities were really tribal, right? So it was totally standard to look inward. They're asking for grace, for blessing, and for the warmth of the divine presence to be focused right there, on them, in their immediate circumstances. It's a very quiet, concentrated beginning. And this actually brings us to our first structural element, a mysterious pause in the text, represented by the word Selah. When reading ancient Hebrew poetry, you'll occasionally hit this word, and it basically represents a stark, empty space. It literally forces the reader, and us as the audience, to just stop, to sit in the silence and really reflect on that initial intimate request. We're meant to feel the full weight of asking for a blessing before we ever get to see what happens next.
Which brings us to part one of the structure, a global vision.
Now, look at the stark contrast between the internal focus of that first verse and the explosive worldwide scope of the second. We shift directly from that localized, intimate us to a vision where your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. The camera has completely panned out. We've gone from a tiny group of people in an ancient desert to the entire earth and all nations, literally in the blink of an eye. The sheer velocity of this expansion is just incredible. So, the crucial takeaway here is understanding the psalmist's sequential argument. This text isn't just a random collection of thoughts, right? It's a meticulously crafted chain reaction. Step 1, God blesses us. That's the initial request. But, and this is key, that blessing isn't the end goal. Think of it kind of like a lighthouse. A lighthouse doesn't just light up to keep its own bulb warm. It shines so that ships miles away can navigate the dark. That's the catalyst. Step 2, because of that blessing, his way becomes known on the earth. The blessing acts as a beacon. And that naturally leads to step 3. The peoples of the world see it and respond with praise. So that local blessing, it has a completely global purpose. Let's move on to part 2, the rhythmic chorus. 4. That is exactly how many times the phrase, "let the peoples praise you," is hammered home in this extremely short text. Out of only 7 verses, the author uses precious literary real estate to repeat this exact phrase 4 distinct times. It's a huge emphasis on the absolute importance of collective joy. The author wants to make completely sure we don't miss the main objective of this expanding ripple. By isolating this exact phrasing, which appears identically in both verses 3 and 5, by the way, we can really hear the structural symmetry at play. Ancient Hebrew poetry didn't use rhyming words at the end of sentences like modern poetry usually does. Instead, it used the rhyming of ideas and structural symmetry. It's a brilliant technique called parallelism or chiasmus, and it creates rhythm and emphasizes meaning. This chorus, "Let the peoples praise you, O God, let all the peoples praise you," acts as the foundational pillars holding up the central message of the entire text. Which leads into part 3, justice and equity. Sandwiched right between those repeating choruses is verse 4, and it reveals exactly why the nations are being called to celebrate in the first place. The text outlines these specific actions as the core reasons for this worldwide jubilation. It says, "Let the nations be glad and sing for joy." But why? Well, because God judges the peoples with equity and guides the nations upon earth. Actually, this is a massive twist for the ancient world. Back then, nations celebrated conquest, raw power, and crushing their enemies. But here, the praise is a direct response to fairness, to justice, and to a steady, equitable hand over all the nations of the earth. The global joy is rooted entirely in global equity.
And then, once again, the poem hits us with a sulla right at the end of verse 4. Just like before, it demands this empty visual pause. We're told about justice, equity, and the guidance of nations, and then the music stops. The text literally forces the audience to digest this incredible promise of global fairness before it moves into the final movement of the song. So take a second and just let the reality of that equity sink in.
All right, on to part 4, the Earth's increase. Coming out of that profound silence, the poem transitions from spiritual praise to a very grounded physical reality. The ripple effect that started with a plea for grace finally touches the physical ground itself. Verse 6 reads, "The earth has yielded its increase. God, our God, shall bless us." This is a tangible harvest. The blessing isn't just some abstract concept anymore. It's manifested in the literal dirt, in the crops, in the physical sustenance of the people. It's a definitive, realized declaration of blessing that you can actually touch and eat. Now notice how beautifully the textbook bookends itself here. If we compare the very beginning with the very end, what started as a hopeful, pleading request, "May God be gracious to us and bless us," transforms entirely by the time we reach verse 7. It becomes an absolute confident certainty. God shall bless us. The journey of the poem has moved the speaker from hoping for a blessing to stating it as an undeniable fact. If we map out the specific word choices, we can track exactly how this entire song was engineered. It's like a giant puzzle. The theme of bless acts as the outer shell, or the container for the poem, appearing in verses 1, 6, and 7. Then the words peoples and nations completely dominate the middle in verses 2, 3, 4, and 5. And finally, the word earth interweaves perfectly throughout verses 2, 4, 6, and 7. The author meticulously braided these three concepts together to build an expanding narrative structure that beautifully holds its form from start to finish. The poem reaches its absolute maximum scope in the final line of verse 7. God shall bless us. Let all the ends of the earth fear him. We have completely finished the journey. Think about how incredibly small the scope was in verse 1, just a tiny tribal group asking for grace. Now, the ripple has expanded so far out that it hits the ends of the earth. There is literally nowhere further to go. The blessing of the few has resulted in the awe and reverence of the absolute boundaries of reality. And this leaves us with a fascinating final thought to consider about the interconnected structure of our own lives. If a single, ancient plea for blessing was structurally designed to ripple out and impact the very ends of the earth, how far do the unseen effects of our own actions travel today? When we seek goodness or blessing in our small, local circles, we might just be setting off a chain reaction that travels much further than we could ever possibly imagine. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the fascinating structures hidden right beneath the surface of the world around us.